of many shows. I hope it's not. I hope it's final, but it's not. This is like the end of an era of building up towards what's going to happen finally of Biden against Trump. And it's almost like Avengers Infinity War. But you know there's got to be an end game, but we'll save that for another time. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is Toilet Paper Diaries, not speak on stage. And as usual, I join my brother from another mother, Ernesto Verdugo, based in Houston, in Texas. As you can see, I'm based in Dubai, in the UAE. And we discuss and debate business models. And today's show is something really special. If you want to know how to win a general election, we implement the art of war, we go deep down and dirty, and we share every single secret that you can imagine. So you too can do what Joe Biden may have done, we're still waiting to see, or Trump may have done, which didn't work but might work in the end. We'll find out exactly how that's going to implement the world and have a knock-on effect in this show. Keep watching the Toilet Paper Diaries. It's a good one. You do not want to miss it. Enjoy. Welcome to the Toilet Paper Diaries. In this episode, we're going to tell you exactly how Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in the US elections, blow by blow, word for word, strategy by strategy in the Toilet Paper Diaries.
The roller coaster of 2020 continues. Here we are.
Every day there's something more crazy. Before we start, can I just put in a caveat that we are going to be talking about the battle that happened as opposed to the asteroid that was going to hit the Earth and kill all of us, which was a thing just before the actual elections were due to happen. Clearly, it didn't happen. I'm a bit disappointed, so we've got the elections to talk about instead.
Exactly. And we are not going to be talking politics. We are basically going to be step by step following exactly what happened. So it doesn't matter in which side of the aisle you are. This is going to be very interesting for you because you're going to see exactly how the whole thing happened.
We're going to break it down step by step, blow by blow. You'll understand exactly what you need to do next time in your business battleground, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And I guarantee it's going to be a wild adventure. So with that, Ernesto, we've not been on for about 2 weeks. We made a deliberate decision not to come on because we couldn't get any sleep anyway. And because everything we said ended in swear words, because the world was just on the edge of like the seat and the knife edge because of the elections. It gone crazy, debate after debate versus arguments versus scandals, and Rudolph Giuliani sitting on a bed with his hand down his pants.
Exactly, and also in a garden center in Philadelphia.
That comes much later. But that's what we're talking. P-Up and Brewery is exactly what we're talking about. So let's get back to business.
We called it. It was exactly the 8th of August. We were doing the Toilet Paper Diaries, and we said Joe Biden is going to win the elections. And our estimates and everything was also based on what Alan Lichtman said, his prediction of Alan Lichtman. And I mean, I do not know if it happened to you, but I mean, a lot of people watched that episode. Actually, that's our most watched episode in the entire series. And I have some incredible comments, but I have also some comments of just saying that we were crazy. But now, are we?
Well, exactly. And the really strange thing is, and it kind of hijacks what we're going to do with the episode, when we share all these things for the episode, you'll find it compulsive, you'll find it shocking, you'll find it agreeable, you'll also find it disappointing, but you'll find a load of stuff that you can use. But all that is hijacked by the fact that by saying Alan Lichtman had already told us what was going to happen, it's like somebody saying, oh, by the way, you know, Ghost, he dies in the end. That's what it's like.
Yeah.
But anyway, we know the end result.
But you know, the funny thing is, on the 28th of October, I also made a very, very interesting connection. I mean, that was not Alan Lichtman or anything. That was actually, I was doing my research, and I discovered that there has been 9 presidents. Right now, there's 10 presidents that have only had one term. And since the very first time in 1830, when John Quincy Adams was going to be fighting against Andrew Jackson, uh, it has been exactly the same thing. Nobody that goes with less than 48% of approval into election night has ever been reelected. So I said, well, wow, that's an incredible insight. Because then I went to see, and Donald Trump we went with 43% of the approval, and obviously I knew that he was not going to be reelected. So I posted this in Facebook, and you should have seen. I mean, it was like, suddenly it was like ants. You know, whenever you put you put some piece of food there, and there were thousands of ants. You know, trying to attack that piece of food, and then they were calling me crazy and whatever. And funny enough, the result of the election was not exactly, but it was almost 43.8%, which is
Is
exactly.
that right? Is
Yeah,
that the percentage?
yeah, exactly. Very similar to that.
Amazing. Is that in terms of votes or cast or the electoral college votes?
No, it's in terms of the popular vote. So
Okay,
it is about the 43%. And what is also very interesting. You can see it very well, and I mean, we're going to talk about it a little bit later on. But what happens is, from 2016 till now, the people that voted for Trump didn't really grow that much. However, the people that voted for Biden grew in about 8 million people. And this is the key of why this whole thing happened. So right now we are getting all this story of, oh no, you know, everything is corrupt and this is fake and this is just an absolute everything that it's incorrect and it's wrong. But what we're going to see, and we're going to see it throughout the show, it's exactly how it happened. And I mean, we're going to call it now. On January 20th, 2021, President 46 is going to be inaugurated. Whether we like it or not, whether people throw tantrums or not, that's what's going to happen.
There's a story of before years ago when that was done, and one of the presidents, I can't remember which one, refused to leave. And it's almost like they moved all the furniture around away from him, put it into a new location. So he's sitting in his underpants in the middle of the floor saying, I'm still president. Let's get on with the breakdown of what really happened. And I think to summarize this, Ernesto, we're talking about two strategies. Now, we talked about these in separate episodes. First of all, you've got the rope-a-dope, Joe Biden, versus the reality TV star, Donald Trump. And that is the battleground, and that's how they went out there. So if you can imagine a huge boxing match or a mixed martial arts battle with, in the red corner, you've got Donald Trump, and in the blue corner, you've got Joe Biden, and that's what we're going to be starting explaining to you right now.
Exactly. So before we go into the battling, we go into the what happened through the strategy. You are abroad. I am in the United States. So what happens is, I mean, whatever I could see, it's of course what's going on, and we have the horrible divide of the reds versus the blues and whatever. How are people seeing it in Dubai, and the people that you talk? Because I know that you know people around the world.
Talking to lots of people, the perceptions that we have overseas are very different from perceptions that Americans have, because there's a lot more intense for you, a lot more one side or the other side. From looking in from the outside, the general feeling is, I wouldn't wash that much dirty washing in public because everybody gets to see it. So Trump wasn't the person that stopped the international relations. It was actually years earlier with George W. Bush invading Iraq. That's when all the world leaders stood back and went, hold on, America's not necessarily on our side all the way through. So I'm going to give that to Trump. It feels like it was him, but it wasn't at all. But what you've got around the world is a couple of things. There's a general distrust that America could go in a direction where we don't play with anybody again. And that's like, imagine getting back together with an ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend. And you've missed them, you've loved them to bits, and they come together and you've got a relationship again, but you know that they can leave you. because you've done it once. So you would never get that close. I've got a feeling that that's kind of how it is like now, but I'm sure that over the sands of time, economics more than anything will drive them coming together. But on that point, there's one thing that's been universal. 4 years of Trump, and I can say this now, could have been a lot worse. We've got a global pandemic. It could have been a world war.
Yeah, that's exactly what many people were very afraid, because they were saying, well, Donald Trump has been one of the few presidents that has never really got us into war. And then I've been always feeling, oh my goodness, the divisiveness in this country is so large that I would not have been surprised if this would have actually eroded into a civil war, and possibly even worse. So it is quite interesting. In fact, there's this video that was recorded by, I think his name is General Michael Hayden, and this is what he had to say about it.
I'm Mike Hayden. I was the former director of the CIA and the NSA. If there is another term for President Trump, I don't know what happens to America. Truth is really important, but especially in intelligence. President Trump doesn't care about facts. President Trump doesn't care about the truth. He doesn't listen to his experts. The FBI says white nationalism is a real problem, and the FBI wants to do something about it, but the president doesn't want to talk about that. He doesn't keep the country safe. It's unbelievable. I was 40 years in the military, okay? Alliances are wonderful. Alliances are win-win. And now I don't know what's happening to our alliances. I mean it. If Trump gives another term, I think many alliances will be gone and America will be alone. And that's a real problem. I absolutely disagree with some of Biden's policies. But that's not important. What's important is the United States, and I'm supporting Joe Biden. Biden is a good man. Donald Trump is not.
So it's fascinating what General Hayden said there, because I think when it comes down to the actual battlegrounds and the potential war, remember Trump from the very beginning said he was going to bring the troops back. And that's one of the criticisms, because he let all the alliances drop. So he didn't really have it in his foreign policy that he wanted to go out and start a battle so we can thank those small mercies. But talking about small mercies, I think that on a day-to-day basis, for a man of color overseas, I just feel that the world is better for my daughter. Not just for me, but for my daughter. And I think it was best brought together by the emotional, viral nature of this clip with Van Jones on CNN. And I saw it happen live, and it just made me tear up at the same time. Take a look.
Well, it's easier to be a parent this morning. It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters. Being a good person matters. And it's easier for a whole lot of people. If you're Muslim in this country, you don't have to worry if the president doesn't want you here. If you're an immigrant, you don't have to worry if the president's going to be happier to have babies snatched away or send dreamers back for no reason. This is vindication for a lot of people who have really suffered. You know, the I can't breathe. You know, that wasn't just George Floyd. That was a lot of people that felt that they couldn't breathe. Every day you're waking up and you're getting these tweets and you just don't know, and you're going to the store and people who have been afraid to show their racism are getting nastier and nastier to you, and you're worried about your kids and you're worried about your sister. And can she just go to Walmart and get back into her car without somebody saying something to her? And you spent so much of your life energy just trying to hold it together. And this is a big deal for us just to be able to get some peace and have a chance for a reset. And the character of the country matters. And being a good man matters. You know, I just want my sons to look at this. Look at this. You know, it's easy to do it the cheap way and get away with stuff, but it comes back around. It comes back around. And this is a good day for this country. I'm sorry for the people who lost. For them, it's not a good day. But for a whole lot of people, it's a good day.
Yeah, it's that clip. It's really shocking, and you know, for example, I mean, I have been in touch with a number of people of color here in the States. All of them my friends, and just to see the feelings that they show are very difficult to grasp for anybody which is white, and that for me has been a very humbling experience. But you know, now that we know how people are feeling abroad, and now that we see how people were invested on it, I think we should get into the military side of this operation, because it was, you know, to a certain extent, this is something that could have been considered, and this is a strong word, but it could have been considered like a coup d'etat, if you want, because this is not something like it has to do with Republicans or it has to do with Democrats. It is just the fact that, you know, he was a president that was robbing so many people off and to the wrong side, and he was just making them feel very, very uncomfortable. So this was a very, very orchestrated thing, and it was just incredible the way it happened.
I agree. So he set this up by just treating it like it is a proper boxing match. Let me introduce the two competitors. Ding, ding, ding. In the red corner, we have Donald Trump, who reinvents the playing field whenever he plays. He's the reality TV star. His specialities are changing the rules, changing the expectations, and changing the Supreme Court. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump in the red corner. And in the blue corner, we have Joseph R. Biden, the rope-a-dope. His specialty is keeping his head down, letting others go into battle when needed, and letting Trump punch himself out. That's the strategy we're going to see from Joe Biden in the blue corner. So ding, ding, let the battle begin.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So let's just try to put this into perspective. I mean, you know, we saw every day President Trump doing rally after rally after rally, and on every rally he was just doing all his oldies and lock her up, and everybody was locked up, and everybody was getting coronavirus, and every single time it was the exact same thing. Now, my question is, how many people that did not vote for him in 2016 actually voted for him right now in 2020? I don't think that the numbers were that big. The people that participated every single one of his rallies were people that were already part of his base. So what he was doing is he was traveling from city to city, having all the same people, while Biden was doing a very different strategy. Everything under the radar, everything using the rope-a-dope effect.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating to see how those two battles are going on, because Trump was always going to get the headlines. He was always going to be able to manipulate the press because he's brilliant at it. Everything from fake news to spinning a story to misdirection. He's been the king of doing this all this time. However, for Biden to step up and start playing a Trump-like game is only going to end up with people saying they're exactly the same. Now, remember how this bounced badly for Hillary Clinton, where it ended up with people saying, I don't like Trump, I don't like Clinton, at least Trump is something new. What Biden wanted to do is not have that same thing, so he didn't talk. He kept it quiet, and he kept it under the radar. And instead of going out with public rallies and news cycles, his battleground was dark social in small groups, behind the scenes in social media, and word of mouth marketing between people and communities who were spreading the word and knocking on doors.
Yeah. Really? Actually, and it's very interesting because in all the groups, the password is exactly the same. And that's what is very, very interesting. But
are you going to tell us what it is?
Of course not. But basically, the way that it was going on was like, well, you know, you're right now living in Arizona, so you know, why don't you go to these people, because these people are they're happy to consider voting for Biden. They are undecided voters, and they were doing the same thing everywhere. And in Georgia, you had Stacey Abrams that was, working with all the black ladies. And in Arizona, you had all the Native Americans and all the Latinos. And it was just incredibly interesting to see what was going on. So it was like a complete different thing. You know what? This reminds me of in 2002, I think it was the Millennium challenge. Remember that? That was amazing.
I remember because I'm very, very young. But I know that this is something that I heard about with Malcolm Gladwell in the book Blink, where he talks about the strategies that are used to change relationships. When you're up against a big army, how you go underground and fight a different guerrilla warfare. Now, you in guerrilla marketing, that's part of your expertise in the internet days. You knew ways and strategies of bypassing all the normal advertising clutter and getting straight to the right key elements. And that's like a basic battleground idea for what we're talking about this. So do you want to explain exactly what happened with the Millennial Challenge?
Before we go into the Millennium Challenge, let me remind you of what happened in 2008. I mean, as you possibly remember, Joe Biden and Barack Obama were working with a guy called David Plouffe. And he was a master in using social media. Right now, what has happened is that Joe Biden has used social media, the dark part of it, which basically, if you do not know what dark social media is they were using private groups in LinkedIn, in WhatsApp, and in Facebook. And this is how they were doing the coordination. And this reminds me of how it was done in the Millennium Challenge.
Now, to look at that, I read about it first by reading the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, where he describes a war game that went on between American forces as they were state of the art versus an imaginary force that was to represent Iran. We've got a video on this. Let's take a look.
In 2002, a Marine general led a fictional version of Iran in a war game against the United States and won. The US military tapped Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper to lead the Red opposing forces in the most expensive military exercise in history. He was put in command of an inferior Middle Eastern-inspired military, and his mission was to go against the full might of the American armed forces. In the first 2 days, he sank an entire carrier battle group. The exercise was called Millennium Challenge 2002. It was designed by the Joint Forces Command over the course of 2 years, and it had 13,500 participants, numerous live and simulated training sites, and was supposed to pit an Iran-like Middle Eastern country against the US military, which would be fielding advanced technology it didn't even plan to implement until 5 years later. The war game would begin with a forced entry exercise that included the 82nd Airborne and the 1st Marine Division. When the Blue Forces issued a surrender ultimatum, Van Riper, commanding the Red Forces, turned them down. Since the Bush doctrine of the period included preemptive strikes against perceived enemies, Van Riper knew the Blue Forces would be coming for him, and they did. But the 3-star general didn't spend 41 years in the Marine Corps being timid. As soon as the US Navy was beyond the point of no return, he hit him. And he hit him hard. Missiles from land-based units, civilian boats, and low-flying planes tore through the fleet as explosives-laden speedboats decimated the Navy using suicide tactics. His signal to initiate the attack was a coded message sent from the minarets of mosques at the call to prayer. In under 10 minutes, the whole thing was over, and Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper was victorious. So, how did 19 ships and some 20,000 US troops end up at the bottom of the Persian Gulf? It started with the OPFOR leadership. Van Riper was the epitome of the salty Marine Corps general officer. He was a 41-year veteran, both enlisted and commissioned, serving everywhere from Vietnam to Desert Storm. Van Riper attended the Marine Corps Amphibious Warfare School, the College of Naval Command and Staff, Army War College, and the Army's Airborne and Ranger schools. That is not the ribbon rack of a timid individual. In fact, the 3-star general had been retired for some 5 years by the time he led the Red Forces of Millennium Challenge. He was an old-school Marine capable of some old-school tactics, and he insisted that technology cannot replace human intuition and the study of basic nature of war, which he called a, quote, terrible, uncertain, chaotic, bloody business. When Van Riper commented on Millennium Challenge, he said that the Blue Forces were stuck in their own mode of thinking. Their vastly superior technology included advanced intelligence matrices and an operational net assessment that told them where the OPFOR vulnerabilities were and what Van Riper was most likely to do next out of a range of possible scenarios. They relied heavily on that. When the Blue took out Red's microwave towers and fiber optics, they expected his forces to use satellite and cell phones that could be monitored. Not a chance. Van Riper instead had used motorcycle couriers, messages hidden in prayers, and even coded lighting systems on his airfields. Tactics employed during World War II. He struck first. He calculated how many cruise missiles their ships could handle, and in his terms, simply launched more than that. In fact, Van Riper hated the kind of analytical decision-making the Blue Forces were doing. He believed it took far too long. His resistance plan included ways of getting his people to make good decisions, using rapid cognition and analog but reliable communications. The other commanders involved called foul, complaining that a real OPFOR would never use the tactics Van Riper used. Except Van Riper's flotilla used boats and explosives like those used against the USS Cole in 2000, when it was attacked by a small explosives-laden boat in a Yemen port. In the end, the Blue Forces were all respawned, and Van Riper was prevented from making moves to counter the Blue Forces' landing. He had no radar, and wasn't allowed to shoot down incoming aircraft he would have otherwise accurately targeted. The rest of the exercise was scripted to let the Blue Force land and win. Van Riper walked out when he realized his commands were being ignored by the exercise planners. The jig was up. The 3-star wrote a 21-page critique of the exercise that was immediately classified. Van Riper spoke out against the rigged game anyway. Nothing was learned from this, he wrote. A culture not willing to think hard and test itself does not augur well for the future. Couldn't agree more.
It's great video, David. It's so similar to what happened right now. It just really amazes me.
And it's incredible that when you look at it, that strategy was taken from centuries of how to beat a bigger force. When you know you haven't got the same battleground or the same skills, but you can work out the elements that will beat a bigger force that's got all the confidence and also the home ground. So let's look and take it back further, centuries ago, before that, to a gentleman called Sun Tzu. Now, there's going to be two different ways of looking at it. Some people say Sun Tzu was an incredible general. Some people say Sun Tzu was an amalgamation of generals and collected stories over a period of time. But let's just pretend that is a guy, a bloke called Sun Tzu in ancient China. Now, he had a number of key philosophies that were used in battle, and he wrote about them. And those books, of that book that he wrote, The Art of War, is not only seen as an incredible battle strategy, but I think there's about 13 different types of terrain you can fight on. He's got a strategy for every single one of them, and they're adopted and used all the way through by every general so far. Now, here's the key. We're going to share some ideas, and I don't think Donald Trump has read that book. There's a slight irony in this. He doesn't read many books, but let's get into The Art of War and see what we're talking about.
Yeah. So the first strategy used on the Biden campaign was strike at the enemy's weak point. And in this case, I mean, I do not know if you agree with me, Dave, but I think it was the coronavirus.
Yeah, without any doubt. I mean, even when we take it back to Alan Lichtman, we look at the fact that there's 13 keys to get to the White House. Trump was winning.
Yeah.
He was going to get into the White House, apart from the fact coronavirus knocked another 3 keys into place, the long and short-term economy, and also meant that the social unrest was there. So coronavirus was something that was indisputable because the amount of people that died, because it hadn't disappeared, and because whether or not you could prove that Trump knew more about it than he was saying, it was just a mess. It needed to be sorted out and people were just dying. So that was a relatively easy thing to spin because you could say nothing, just wear a mask, keep social distancing, not even risk people on a rally. And there'll be a ton of people who say, yeah, I can see the figures. I'm not going to get involved in going along to a rally. I prefer to watch it on my TV. And that's a win for Biden.
Exactly. So let's have a look at what Sun Tzu was saying and how it played also in the past.
Sun Tzu says, "Avoid what is strong and strike at what is weak." Sun Tzu is a strong believer that winning the war with as little unnecessary combat as possible is the key to true victory.
Okay, so number 2 is fight without fighting if you can. So that means effectively, if you can do stuff to weaken your enemy and to beat your enemy without actually doing any damage to yourself or your own troops, then go ahead. In this case, the first debate was a classic example. Remember, we're looking at Biden's rope-a-dope, the idea of hugging himself onto the ropes like Muhammad Ali did in the Rumble in the Jungle in 1973, I think it was, where George Foreman, a much bigger puncher, punched himself out for 9 rounds, and then when his arms got tired, Ali took him down with about 2 punches. So the first debate was Trump just going at it with everything he had, and Biden fighting a little bit, but basically standing back on the ropes and letting Trump end up with a lot of people saying he shouldn't have done that. Then he didn't go into battle. He could have done, but what he did was got celebrity endorsements from everybody who didn't like Donald Trump, and they all did their thing. Songs, messages, memes, TV shows, let them go out and do the fighting. Because one of the things about Joe Biden is he does talk a lot. People don't know that. He's been in politics for 50 odd years. And what they used to say was he was a bit of a motor mouth. So for him to be so quiet was strategic. He couldn't really be roped unless he said anything. So he kept quiet. So that's number 2 with Sun Tzu. Let's have a look at what the official documentation of that point means.
Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting, and the key to doing so is to know your enemy well. If your opponent is arrogant, pretend to be weak, so he will underestimate you. If he was relaxing, attack and give him no rest. If his forces are united, separate them. Sun Tzu is essentially saying that if you know your opponent's weaknesses and how to exploit them, you will never lose.
And on number 3, we have know yourself and know your enemy inside out, so you can predict what are going to be their actions. And this is what is incredibly interesting. What I was mentioning a little bit earlier, he was doing his rallies like if he will be the challenger, not the incumbent. He was using the strategy of the challenger and not the incumbent, the exact same strategy that worked for him in 2016. While the challenger, which in this case was Biden, was using dark social. Once again, if you do not know what dark social is using private groups, secret groups that had to be accessed with a password, where he was mobilizing all the grassroots to make sure that everybody was actually doing calls to people that were not knowing who to vote to, all these undecided voters. It was just incredible to see how well orchestrated it was done. And now imagine for somebody that had the opportunity to see what was going on in one camp and in the other camp, because of course I was observer in both, I knew exactly how it was going to be played. But now let's have a look at this video so that you can see how it played in history.
Sun Tzu says, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. During the mid-1960s, a war took place between the North Vietnamese communists and the United States of America. Instead of confronting the Americans head-on, the Viet Cong had a different idea in mind. They used unconventional guerrilla warfare tactics, which included hit-and-run strategies. This proved very effective against the much larger military of the Americans. It's more important to outthink your enemy than to outfight him. The Viet Cong forces were inferior to the Americans in both man and firepower, so guerrilla warfare tactics allowed them to inflict significant damage while keeping their casualties to a minimum. They also had unparalleled knowledge of the terrain. This included a vast network of underground tunnels, allowing them to evade carpet bombing and escape the enemy. The terrain was also laced with various booby traps and landmines. Even though the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese were heavily out-armed by the American superpower, they were still able to defeat them as they truly understood Sun Tzu's philosophy.
So with that, Ernesto, what we're talking about is rather than fighting in public, the fighting was done behind closed doors in small groups, because that meant you didn't have to do it in public, and it also meant that you didn't have to really fight. Number 4 is misdirection. And this is something that actually Trump is brilliant at doing. He's been misdirecting and reinventing the game all the way through. What Sun Tzu says is appear close when far when close, and give a false sense of security. So what Biden did was made it look like he was weaker than Trump. Trump was as alpha as it needed to get, all the time being out there and saying what he needed to say. But what Biden did was just stay back and almost stay silent until asked a question. And that was very effective. But let's look at how Sun Tzu plays that strategy through history.
All warfare is based on deception. Hence, when we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. This philosophy can be seen in the World War II invasion of Normandy, known as D-Day. The British created several fictional units of troops stationed in Scotland who were ready to invade Europe through its northern regions, in particular Scandinavia. They then used several misinformation techniques to persuade Hitler that 350,000 of these troops were primed to attack. Radio chatter in Scotland lit up with talks of these troops preparing for an overseas assault, and many of these transmissions were made easily interceptable. Allied spies who had been able to infiltrate the Germans reported these developments as well, reinforcing their legitimacy. These spies also took photographs of planes and tanks posed for invasion, but these were actually blow-up models in most cases. All this caused dozens of German divisions to go up to bogus locations and wait for an imaginary army to show up, whilst important battles were fought elsewhere. This method of dividing enemy forces was also employed to a greater extent on D-Day itself. Soviet forces kept around 1 million of the German forces busy on the Eastern Front, whilst the Allied invasion occurred on the Western Front. This tactic of dividing the enemy is one of Sun Tzu's key philosophies and allowed the Allies to achieve victory and eventually win the war.
So that means that whilst Trump was making fun of Biden for being unpopular and only having 20 people or so at his rallies, what he didn't realize is the rallies were ongoing in small groups, behind closed doors and with dark social networks, and also behind closed doors with WhatsApp and with chats and with people meeting behind the scenes, but staying off your regular media and regular social media.
Yeah, it was just incredible to see. I mean, we both saw it because we were watching both strategies and how they were playing out. And while everybody was fighting in Facebook, because oh no, this is what's going on, and we're going to be having a majority, and it's going to be a landslide from Trump. I mean, the two of you we were just laughing our heads off because we knew exactly what was happening behind the scenes. It was just incredibly funny, don't you think?
Absolutely. But then you've got to add an extra element. And this element, if you ever watch a war film, or if you ever watch some kind of exciting going down to the wire style battle, there's normally the last minute cavalry that come in and save the day. In this case, it was the Lincoln Project, who were spies. They're actually spies in your face in a way that actually Trump has always said things that was on his mind and didn't hide it. But they actually know what was going on behind enemy lines. They're fighting on behalf of Joe Biden whilst being Republicans. So what they knew was exactly how to make Republicans rally under their flag and go against an enemy. So they turned their guns round on their own enemy, which in their case was Trump, to drive Republicans, or many of them, to sway and vote for Biden.
How would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it a 10.
Some of the most gut-punching, bare-knuckled, and most widely viewed anti-Trump ads of this election season
Trump failed America.
Have not come from the Biden campaign.
I'm a pro-life, gun-owning combat veteran.
They've come from the Lincoln Project, trying to convince fellow Republicans
he's a draft dodger-in-chief who despises the men and women he supposedly leads.
To elect a Democrat.
It's time for decency. It's time for Joe Biden.
How did serious Republicans decide to go rogue?
We all had a conviction that there are millions of Republicans who look at this debacle and reject it. And what we thought we could do is talk to those voters in the language and the iconography that they understand, connect with them and persuade them, many of them, to vote for the Democratic nominee for the first time in their lives.
Have you lost friends over this?
For sure, of course.
Losers. Suckers. Dopes. Babies. That's how Donald Trump describes our men and women in uniform. Even Fox News confirms he said it. An American president would know our troops are defined by words like courage, honor, integrity, strength, patriotism, valor, and for so many, sacrifice. He's a draft dodger-in-chief who despises the men and women he supposedly leads. He insults their deaths and injuries with his contempt, He looks down on them for serving this nation, mocking them because there's no money in it. Millions of Americans have served and sacrificed. Millions more have sent a family member off to war. Only Donald Trump mocks their deaths, because Donald Trump is simply un-American.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it played. So it is very interesting. And now what happens is, and this is exactly what I hope. I just posted a very nice meme yesterday on my Facebook saying, well, you know, some people want the red America, some people want a blue America. I want the United States, and there's a very, very nice flag. This was exactly the message from Biden.
And all those who supported us, I'm proud of the campaign we built and ran. I'm proud of the coalition we put together, the broadest and most diverse coalition in history. Democrats, Republicans, independents, progressives, moderates, conservatives, young, old, urban, suburban, rural, gay, straight, transgender, white, Latino, Asian, Native American. I mean it, especially those moments, and especially those moments when this campaign was at its lowest ebb. The African-American community stood up again for me. You've always had my back, and I'll have yours. I said at the outset, I wanted to represent this campaign to represent and look like America. We've done that. Now that's what I want the administration to look like and act like. For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now let's give each other a chance. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies, they are Americans.
But now, Dave, in reality, this is not over. I mean, taken over from a way of ruling that possibly was not approved by many people. I mean, I think President-elect Biden and Harris are going to have a tremendous amount of work.
Completely. If you're going to use an analogy, then that was the end of the battle, but now it's the beginning of the war. And the war has a number of different challenges that it's got. First of all, Biden's got to unite all the different minorities. So as the minorities won state by state, whether black, brown, yellow, green, pink, whatever was going on, he's got to bring them all under the promise that whatever he's going to do is going to satisfy the problems that have been there for a very, very long time in the way that America's being governed, because Trumps don't happen by accident, they happen because of a real problem there. And the challenge for Biden is he's been around for most of when that problem was happening. So he's now going to go against what he helped create and help reform it. So that's the first point. What else has he got to do in Eston?
Well, I mean, he has to make sure that a task is put together to finalize all this mess with the coronavirus. I mean, we see some examples like in Taiwan that there's already been 220 days without one single case. And we see here in the United States that we are right now thriving. I mean, right now it's 120,000 cases per day or something ridiculous like that. So I think the approach that is going to be taken from the Biden administration, from the Trump administration, is going to be like day and night. And that is going to be a very, very big challenge.
And while he's doing that, he's got to also make sure that he brings together Trump supporters. If you're going to unite the country, you've got to give them what was a problem in the first place, which is the fact that a lot of industries are just dying. And they're dying because of progress.
Yeah.
Fossil fuel, oil, gas, all these things are giving way towards wind and solar and water, and people are scared of that. So somehow he's got to convince those guys that there's a new business coming, introduce digital, introduce tech, get people trained, and put America back where it was before as being one of the biggest, most powerful, productive countries on the planet.
Yeah, and how about also the economy? The economy needs to be restored because, I mean, right now, as you were saying, I mean, President Trump he would have sailed through a re-election if it would not have been because of the coronavirus. But right now, I mean, we are where we are, and it is what it is. And there's a ton of work, because I think, as we have been mentioning in the Toilet Paper Diaries for a number of episodes, the world has changed. I mean, the jobs that they once were, they're not going to be there, and it's going to be a humongous challenge.
It's going to be a huge challenge, and the world economy is taking a bit of a dive at the moment anyway. Remember, there's huge unemployment in America, and there's also no way that people can, it's not like the virus disappears and everyone just goes back to work. The industries have changed as a result of lockdown worldwide. So people who are skilled in the services industry, which was, let's face it, about 80% of the workforce in the United States, cannot go back and service people in restaurants or in deliveries or in those things because they've still got an active contagion. So what Biden's got to do is somehow rescue the economy whilst making sure that people have the ability to earn by retraining or reskilling or finding some way of making it work or getting people to be subsidized by the government a little bit longer. There are people being homeless as a result of the fact there wasn't enough money coming into paying rent. Good people all over America who need to be resolved with this. So that's no simple challenge. What I'm going to throw out there as well is climate change. I mean, that's the reason that there's a change in fossil fuels around the world and people are looking at it, because the forest fires that we're experiencing all the way through the lockdown were also heralded by what went on, and we've even forgotten about it, in Australia, where they had those incredible fires where species were just being burned and being eradicated from the planet because climate change is a real thing. Now that means that Biden can get back into it and legislate it, he's still going to have the same resistance from the industries because nobody wants to lose their fortune or their ability to earn. He's going to have to placate them whilst looking after the jobs of people at the same time, while heralding in new industries. Big challenge during coronavirus.
Yeah, and I think also I think the very last that we can think of right now is they're going to have to restore the relationships with many of the allies, because as General Hayden was saying, you know, they had to tolerate the brash behavior. I mean, you remember possibly Trump walking ahead of the Queen when he was not supposed to do that. And he was just basically bumping and trying to be in front of all these people in NATO, pushing the Prime Minister of Montenegro there, and doing all sorts of things around the world that were very, very damaging. And yes, of course, I mean, a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but you know, he created the peace agreement in the Middle East and whatever, and that might be for another episode. But I mean, what people need to understand is that this world is incredibly grateful. Most of the people around the world, of course, there's going to be a lot of divisions, but as Van Jones was saying, they were very grateful that this actually happened. I mean, the overall feeling everywhere was, oh my goodness, now we can rest. And once again, this has nothing to do with Republicans. It has nothing to do with Democrats. This has to do with character. The cult of character, which I think is something that we're going to be covering also on possibly the next episode of the Toilet Paper Diaries. So what do you think of that, Dave?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think the world relationships have to be restored because it's a very small place. You've got the truth, which is that the big superpowers, you've got China, you've got Russia, you've got America, and you've got India, and you've got Europe, which is fragmented thanks to Britain leaving it. It's really all up for grabs. What America did was step out of it, which means that everyone's playing without imagining America being a part of it. If America has a real interest, it's a time now to get together and have a say in the table. So that's one that people are kind of liking. At the time of recording, everybody's turned around to Biden and said, good job, apart from the other superpowers who are not happy because they kind of liked it when Trump was in charge. So I think it's a case of watch this space, but from somebody living on the other side of the planet, looking in with fond memories of a relationship that we all had with America, it feels like a new dawn. And it also feels like the coronavirus, the economy, the challenges have to be led by America, because we've always looked up to and we've always followed the lead that they would share. It feels now like we're back in the driving seat and we all look forward to America leading the way. In whatever capacity they can, that would make us all a lot happier.
The end is coming. The end of the noise and lies. The end of the chaos and division. The end of the hate. In its place, a new America is ready to stand tall again. Ready to restore the goodness in the heart of our nation. Ready to put people before politics. Ready to lead, to innovate, to grow, to heal. It won't always be easy. There are tough times to come. COVID to be defeated. An economy to restore. But that new day is coming. A day when words like caring, competent, and professional won't be insults. A day when compassion and character mean more than celebrity. A day when every American's rights are respected and valued. That day is coming because of your hard work, your commitment, your energy and passion. That day is coming because of your vote. Joe Biden, our president.
All I have to say is that I feel very proud of being living in this country. I definitely would like to say God bless America and good luck to President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris.
Well, I would like to say exactly the same thing, apart from I'm glad over last year I wasn't living in America and I could just look from the outside and go, oh, Dubai's kind of cool today. No worries at all. But it's been an honor and a challenge and a pleasure to share all this time with our many friends on both sides. Hopefully they won't have sides, but just have opinions.
Yeah.
Because America needs to come together. And I've got loads of Republican friends, loads of Democrat friends of all color, size, religion, and everyone bleeds the same way. So let's make sure we don't see any more blood. Let's just see how we can move forward.
So let's just finish this episode with the beautiful video that they posted the moment that they were actually confirmed that they had won the election.
Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties. Now wait a minute. I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed His grace on thee. He crowned not good. Yes, He did. Heavy brotherhood from sea to shining sea. You know, I wish I had somebody to help me sing this. America, America, I love you, America. You see, my God, He done shed His face on thee. Oh, Lord, I thank you, Lord.
See you next week.
Take it easy and welcome back to America the Brave.